Cool. We have the noise threshold on now, so we shouldn't be as trash. And I feel like I should at some point make that automatic changeover. Now we're just sort of at the mercy. You remember to snap at the right time. Oh snap. Did it. We're here. Weird. There's Blender. There's Blender. The layout, this is the setup. I recall way there. When I asked for a meme, like, yeah man, we can have memes. And then there was. And we get a SoundCloud ad, because we gotta support our boy, Sunny Boy. 93 at SoundCloud. SoundCloud.com/sunnyboy93. That's them. They make music. Oh, no. Hey. Yeah, that's why we're over here. I recall now. What this look like? It smoothed it all flat. Make it a little thinner. Or like a good neighbor, State Farm is there. Heck, how long can I make this? It's okay. That's when everything's popped out and you can see them. What if we made Love Junky's good stuff. Ooh, that noise gate threshold means I do have to speak with a little bit of direction. It's not an omnidirectional mic. I thought about getting a lapel mic so we could just pop it on, but we haven't quite gotten there yet. Also, gotta keep the YouTube editing going. We have to edit out all those copyright claims. I'll talk about NFTs in the future, I suppose. If Mist ever gets here. Is Mist here? It is here. Right. Got these all popped out. I think we're gonna tab over to edit mode, grab that. Ooh. Actually, we can't grab them both because we're going to move them in opposite directions. That won't go over well. Shot. Yeah. -0.3. Oh, like that. -0.3. I'm a fool. It's the opposite direction, so it's just 0.3. What was I thinking? We can tab back over, snap to this one, tab. Not caps lock, but if we tab in, tab in. -0.3. Just regular good old Already All-American 0.3. Justify making this in 3 dimensions. But I don't recall if I tried this. Cool. I actually... Oh. Where does that show up? Inside of itself? Don't quite get why it shows up inside of itself. Oh well. We must have. Shade all this flat so I can see what I'm doing. Yeah. That's pulled in, that's pulled in. Both sides, and it's just the third one that I didn't pull in. That negative 0.3. And you can go in positive 0.3. Wham bam. Thank you, ma'am. Kind of like a shaded flat now that I look at it. We just let it ride. Yeah. And don't worry, we'll... I don't know, maybe this is a good person to watch. We'll find out, I suppose. Excuse me. You're not explaining anything. That's not a very good tutorial. Not a very good tutorial at all, are you? I wanted the whole cylinder to spin. So give you insert a keyframe type. I suppose I technically don't need to have the center rotate if everything rotates around it, but I feel like that's nothing. What did I have? About in object mode. Rotation. Right there's right there. Where's my... That's not correct. Oh. Oh. Should be... God damn it. How are they at the same exact axis? Riddle me that. Like I wanted to spin end over end. And it should be around the x-axis. for whatever reason. If we do 360 and insert a keyframe, a rotation. Not what I want. How do I do that one? Actually, what does this look like now? It's kind of dumb. Kind of like it. We'll keep it. Change it later. Maybe we just keep it tumbling end over end like that. Open. Literally just saved it. This one? Yeah. You're it. How? In the fresh hell? Can't spell. Sure. I thought that one would be fine, but it's not. Wow. Or the UV editor. Boy. Yeah, dang fiber ads. Not the rip, grab, relax. I want. Right. I recall what was going on here. What is it really? What's going on here? At the future total control. What is it? I'll listen to you shortly, however. Heckman, how do we... Window. Oh, not a new window. I have to... Right there. We don't want the image viewport, the texture node, etc. Graph editor. Texture node editor? Texture node editor. Brush. Image editor? That's not what we're looking for at all. Man. I want virtual desktops set up on Windows. That sounds aggravating. Actually, you know what we could do? Render this image. Image. Save it. I can save it. Untitled PNG. I dropped a couple of frames. Hate it. I'm aware that we dropped every frame known to man. We're back now, though. Oh. What do we get for rendering when we're streaming? Yeah. Yeah, we'll close that program. Where it wasn't. But got us in this mess in the first place. But what we need to know. What are these? What are those keyframes? We hide the spokes. Negative on the Y radius? The Y axis? We'll try going negative on the Y axis. I want to save that shit. Get me out of here. Never want to see it again before. Never want to see it again in my life. That's the blend file. If we flip the whole thing 90 degrees. Actual layout. Let's flip 90. I had it flip negative 90. Right, because that's it on the x-axis. If we move it on the y-axis, still nothing. Oh. Disappointing to say the least. Kind of want them to spin out. You know what I mean? We're able to. Just because it wasn't on an axis that I. Man. truly the biggest loser. Set that to 0. And, insert a keyframe. You want your rotation there. And then at 48, the rotation is going to be 360. I'm going to insert a keyframe there. Your rotation. Oh, cool, Twitch. Am I live? I think that's cool. Just pop on, tell me when I'm live or not. Oh my god, do I cry? Now if we let this go. Damn you, Cog. I'm stealing your viewers. Don't think I won't. They're mine for the taking. Oh, cool. Rated Aaron, though. I hope Aaron's doing good things. I, made this wheel spin on the axis I wanted it to. The life's good. Coon. We're gonna keep promoting Sunny Boy 93's hit new album. Yeah, buddy. And what if at frame 98 we had a flash of white? Like after they spin out. Where's the camera at? Actually looks legit cool. Okay, ooh. What about if we do that? I think we can shade them smooth. Shade them smooth. Shade them smooth. Shade them smooth. What if we get not one light? What's the intensity on this? Like nothing. 1,000 watts. 10,000. I hope that's 10, maybe it's 1,000. Tell me it's Shift D to duplicate. Shift D. Bam. Shimmers like the morning sun. Like, hey, I know this song. Wait a minute. That's just Safe in Shapes by Sunny Boy off the hit album Love Junkie. Gotta throw myself against the wall. Fucking do it, you won't. You wouldn't dare. You wouldn't dare. I do have to remember that we can't stream and render, or the whole stream will just die. I rendered a single JPEG. Remember when Barry took over? Yeah, what a wild time that was. I remember when Barry was here, and you were here, Barry. That was a time. It feels like just the other day. There's my files. It feels like just the other day this massive badger was rampaging unchecked. You open? Don't you do the things that you do, little computer? Gonna make me this file on. That Barry. They're still here. They're still around, just not as imposing as they were before. That mane, though, yeah, I don't know. Like, I could definitely stand to trim some of the split ends, take in the beard a little bit. We'll worry about that post-COVID. You know, when you don't die from people being near you and breathing air. It's true. That classic old clip. What a baby boy. Time it was. The young lad. So foolish in their youth. I write dapper chap. And that's why I don't keep my hair short. That's why we don't keep the hair short. I mean, it looks fine. With short hair, I feel like I look 15 years old, and that's not a good look. No, it is a better look. Turning on the light so the rest of this blue screen gets blued out. Better.
Season Pass from TXU Energy is back and better than ever. Save 50% off your energy charges all winter and summer long. So, you can stay cozy and comfortable in your own home, or you could always risk it. I mean, Texas weather is pretty tame, right? Predictable? None of the above?
Man, how do I...
50% off your energy charges all winter and summer
How does
long.
me existing just make it worse?
Season Pass, only from TXU Energy. Tap the banner now to learn more.
I mean, I suppose now I have shadows from the light. I need another light behind. Oh well. Oh well. Why am I being added? The heck? Dang public Discord servers. Get out of here, Barry. The reign of terror has come to an end. That's enough of that. Enjoy the rest of your whimsical existence, Skeebert Bartholomew. The, not Twitch streamer. Also that clip you made, Lamau. Like, I feel like every other sentence you say should be clipped and remembered, revered, put into a book. Just a collection of skeebisms. All the... Yeah, basically I said the bad F word. Oh, you better not say anything bad about the faggots, or, you know, they'll cancel you on Twitter. Because that's how it works. Oh. I mean, you two, you're able to hear. I don't know, I always, every time it comes up, I'm like, we should have something creative and witty to actually say. But realistically, the ring reverberates deep within your soul. Is what it means to anyone who hears it. In its infinite lack of knowledge, it has any meaning you associate to it. Any piece of wisdom, any arbitrary thought or ideal. You're like, wow, that's pretty chimish. And that it is. Also, that's enough of that. New file. Just general. Look at that block. Big hardy brick. A fool. We just tab. We could do. Let's grab a face. This face. Heck. We'll way the fuck out there. Just join those. Oop. Solve those faces. Solve those faces. Solve those faces. I feel the ring of the chime reverberate within my rib cage. Your mighty heart, full of love and compassion. That's pretty neat. That's some good shit. Not only is it a single brick, now listen to this man tell us.
Tutorial, I want to show you how I'm preparing the brick shaders.
Oh. You led me astray. That's no URL. No, don't. It's true. You know, anything on the Twitch platform is going to be blamed for anything Twitch does. That's simply how it operates. Stereo. Stereo. Rick. What's that? C137. That's snappy wordplay. Tell you what.
So I'm gonna start with one of our free textures, and by the way, you can download 30
Man. I don't know what this tutorial man's up to, where they are, what they're doing with themselves. They're doing this all in the layup modified? Sure. But what if we did it under shading, because shading is a good place to be?
brick shaders from the Chocoforce store. These are the completely free shaders. Please check out link in the video description. But I will
Yeah.
drag and drop the diffuse texture to my setup, which, as you can see, is quite simple. Basic principled PSDF shader, very simple scene setup with just some 3-point lamps. So drag and drop my texture, my brick texture. This is the very straightforward result. And if you've been following my video tutorials like bricks, and we also have something called the ID map. I drag and drop it here and
Sure. God damn it, Fiverr. I gotta just hire people for $5. It's absurd. Yeah, make them realistic. Okay, but I don't want to start with the brick texture, do I? Like, we want to... Yeah. This is what we want. I want to make the bricks in nodes, not just slap a PNG over top of it. You know what I mean? Like, it's one thing just groove and chew. It's another thing to write the ones and zeros yourself. Swear to fuck, Twitch ads make me want to commit on life. No doubt. Dying's not great. Yeah. You wouldn't get Twitch ads if you just subbed. If you're here watching Twitch, you have $5 to spare. You can just sub to any channel you want to watch, and that's how you can get away from Twitch ads. And then Twitch won't make any money off you. if you don't watch their ads. That's how that works. No, don't give Twitch money. No matter what their marketing team says. Alright, we got this material output. Oh god. Heck, man. Not the animation, not the rendering, not the compositing. The texture paint. Not the texture paint? What's UV editing get us? Twitch thoughts are on the marketing team. It all makes sense now. It's true. You know who really runs Twitch? The board of executives. Some Bezos-esque figure who enjoys money. It's got this conniving plan that if you give people some of the money, they'll give you even more. Like, what the heck, man? Why do we have these cash at all? What is the name of this? The shader editor. Got it. Oh no. Horizontal split? Horizontal split. Sure. Of course, it's Twitch thoughts on the marketing team. Twitch thoughts all the way down. You think they made a platform like this for video games? Weird art? Never was. Just go the way of Venezuela and make money worthless. Got it. That has a high probability of being it. Hyperinflation. Everyone's all about the NFTs and cryptocurrencies. They're forgetting you could just hyperinflate that shit and get it out of here.
Setup for this material is quite simple. We're going to be using a UV map because we want.
I also still can't see anything in this image. Oh. Because it's 280p. Yep. Object, and like UV map. Shoot. That's gonna be our. I don't know, they have a little converter in there. I feel like we want a converter. We have a UV. Not the diffuse. Well, we'll just run like this until it explodes.
Texture around on the wall after this. Go to vector map.
Demand chicken. We're gonna tar and feather them? Tar and feather Bezos? The tax collectors? And whoever's spending $5,000 on NFTs, they just get tarred and feathered. You hate to see it, but sometimes it's how it be. I don't make the rules. I just have too many tar and feathers in my back pocket. The heck are you on about?
It's quite simple. We're going to be using a UV map because we want to be able to push this texture around on the wall after this. Add a converter vector map, set this up to scale. This is
Oh, cool. Finally rendered it. It's not. Add search. The Twitch, the Twitch gang commits tax fraud. can't commit tax fraud if you don't pay taxes. What a fool. Yeah, group, script, converter.
Hey, my name's James.
Shader too.
What I love about Chick-fil-A's grilled spicy deluxe is the
God dang,
good old kettle
Chick-fil-A.
sauce, and then that cilantro and lime sauce that kind of balances things out. Just delicious.
Chick-fil-A's grilled spicy deluxe sandwich, available for a limited time only. Real guests paid for their testimonial.
Hi, James. James commits tax fraud? That canon? I know not what these buttons do. James is the fall guy. I could see it. I mean, you hate to crunch him off like that, but someone's got to take the fall. It ain't gonna be the old blood, you know. Neither of those are the words we were looking for. Vector scalar. Transform. Okay, well, it doesn't put out another vector, doesn't it? It does put out another vector. Should be like a scale. Okay, there's also just one called brick texture. Job. Mighty sauce, if I do say so myself. You know, every good scheme needs a good fall guy. That's what I always say. I've never said anything to spite. No, so it's not bump. Vector displacement? No. Ooh. Yes. But also no. Vector mapping? No, I don't think so. Is it vector normal? Nope. Vector curves? The vector transform? No. Displacement it is. Alright, what am I? Get back here. So I know if I can't hear it, then stream can't hear it. That's how audio works on Windows. I swear, if you two give me a Of course. Why, of course. Never find what you're looking for if you just keep looking in the wrong place. That makes sense. That's good stuff. Also, where's... Oh, this is UV editing. Right. Right.
Converter, separate X, Y, Z. Basically what we need to do.
Another converter to separate the XYZ. I assume it's just whatever one of those named. Separate XYZ.
Do is we need every row to be offset from one another. So if you have bricks, you want your bricks to sort of span the gap of every
Right, because they're gonna be
to just take a
race cross.
here set to modulo, and bricks are 3 times wider than they are high generally. So I'm going to go 3 in X and 1 in setup for this material.
Yeah.
Simple, we're going to be using a UV map because we want to be able to push this texture around on a wall. After this, add a converter vector map, set this up to scale, and this is going to give you
Yeah.
control of how many bricks we're going to be able to see. We're going to be adding a converter, separate X, Y, Z. Basically what we need to do is we need every other row to be offset from one another. So if you have 3 rows of bricks like this, you want your bricks to sort of span the
Yes.
gap of every other row. If I was to just take another vector map here, set
Set this to a fraction. Modulo. My apologies. Another in vector. If we add nope.
bricks are 3 times wider than they are high generally. So 3
So we do 3 by 1.
1 in Y. You can see that all of these bricks have the same point where they divide in between the same multipliers. What we want is for every other row to be shifted one direction or other. The easiest way to do this is to have our Y here. So this is going up. And we want every other row, so we're going to take the map mode.
Okay, gotta. We I never wanted to do this. Oh, 'cause we need. Oop. Not alt break though. How do we remove? Look at that. That's pretty good. Then I can see whether or not I'm in frame. I can also see this. Some of it. Thank you. And because like their taskbar's at the top, my taskbar's at the top, so I can't see anything. Okay, we'll take in the vector. Get this the heck out of Dodge. Our Y is going to be moduloed. We're going to add another, but it's not the separate. Converter. modulo. Add. What do they add? Add a converter. Thing. Shift A converter. Yeah? The math we want is a modulo. We're going to take in that y value. Like, sure, do. Shift A. Math. If it less than. Threshold 1. Let's value in. Yeah. Oh, no. I know not why these things are. Oh, it's middle mouse. Click around. Alright. Okay. The X is going to be also moduloed. No, they're going to be added.
Now we're only offsetting by a unit 1, by the way. If our bricks were 2,
Modulo 2, if it's less than 1. Punch that in.
wide, and this would be perfect. This would be halfway, but because we're working at 3, you can see that we need this less than to be increased. This is outgoing.
You never know. We always need that to be positive.
Zeros and ones. I'm going to increase this to be outgoing 1.5
Huh?
See, as I change this, it's offsetting any row which is white. For what we need to do, we're not actually going to be using this math node modulo, we're going to be using a vector. We're going to converter vector math and rather
What? Hey. New vector transform. No. How about the vectors? Heading vectors. Is that displacement? No. Vector. It's not bump. Not mapping. No, don't snap into everything. Get out of here. Not the rotation. It's vector math, of course. Over there, vector math. We can take that last. Don't worry about that modulo. We can take this value, dump it in there. It's not really add. It would never be add. Ooh. Right. You don't need the modulo. We're to separate the XYZ. No, it needs to combine the XYZ. And this is modulo. Add X, Y, Z. We need to combine them. This is our, yeah, that's our X. Vectors, going to that vector. No. How do we... It's ungrouped. Not all click. Not. It would never be anything easy. The screen alone is making me panic. No fear. It's just a couple of nodes hopping around that maybe make red bricks. We'll find out. Sure. Back up. We're taking this Y. And this X. We're adding them. We're combining. Got it. Actually pretty proud of this song. No fear, Cogger's here. That's true. That classic all-American dream sequence. Ain't gonna lie, it's pretty relaxing. Like, sure you come to it, but it's also just good. Like, I don't want to say better than your other songs, put them down, or say there's some sort of hierarchy, but Dream Sequence has a lot of heart to it. Not that I don't love your old library, my dear Sonny boy. Ooh, not unfollow. Who else are we following that makes music? Dr. Fondle MD. Such a lad. Like one of my friends from high school was a part of this project. I didn't even realize they put together a new album. That's nice. That's always a treat. Dr. Fondle MD. No medical degree, just my dick. Oh shit. Yeah. Would highly recommend Lab Collab.
That would start a fire. Exactly.
Oh, I forgot. This chat box has them set to fall off.
In place, but if I were to add this row mask to that,
Heck, you mean add another? We got the module and the less than coming off the Y. This multiply we may or may not need. Adding together the value from the X and the value from the less than. Meaning we don't need this multiply at all. Get out of here. The modulo is going to be over here instead. Zoom out, I can't see what they're up to. We just took the multiply off. Cool, because you are a UV editor. Like, a horizontal split this off? The UV is fine. An image editor? I feel like it has to be, right? It's gotta be. No. Yeah, it is just a layout. The plane. Cool. What are you? Scale separate. Scale separate. I recall they make this. And they're like, nah, man, that's not even me. It's modulo pops it off. Right, we're gonna separate it up. Modulo off the Y. At a less than on the modulo.
No one can take away what it means to be among the few, the proud, the Marines. Learn more at marines.com.
Is that another modulo on top? The X.
I guess my frontal lobe is finally changing. It feels the veins and no temptation to feel the same sensation I once had. Looking towards the future, let me pack my bag. Used to be known as Mr. Drag, now I'm Mr. Positive, and that's a humble brag. Put on the gas, just trying to pass. Thoughts like drinks on a dash, have them spilling everywhere, and I'll
Cool.
crash.
We actually need to add them.
That's an analogy of how I used to be thinking inside my head. Now I'm like the Pillsbury Doughboy, and I'm about my bread because I'm thinking more about calories and less about my salaries. Who would have thought me, the mental hoarder, everything would learn to let go, like a two divorced couples trying to
This ad is going to feed into this modulo. Why would you connect? Got it. If you put it over a line, it'll snap into the line. Got it.
skin pigments ain't color as Moses. These days crackers stay looking like poses with fake tan. Other one
This module, there's the ad.
sexy only when they steal it from my culture. I'm trying to stay woke, let go of the negative feelings that I'm harboring. Got me low like a sedative. I need to meditate, medicate. I'm losing touch between the difference of the two options.
How about another one? Make this a multiply. I suppose we did need it the whole time? Gonna take in one of those. Pop out the ad. Where the heck does that go then? Where's the less than? The less than just feeds all the way back to the material.
And you can see as I change this, it's offsetting any row which is 1. So what we need to do, we're not actually going to be using this math node.
And it pays the bills, but I'll be damned if it isn't stressful. You getting paid for this? You know what?
Okay, and it's actually this modulo.
Vector math and rather than just plugging
We're gonna actually add a vector map.
Here we go, boys. Down the hatch. Alright. Pass them around. Okay. Cheers. Yeah, cheers, bud. To the rest of the show. Yeah, let's do it. Yeah. Hey, Lewis.
this in, we obviously only want this.
Oh, fuck. The DJ's playing that song. We
So
gotta
what we
get
need
back
to do,
out
we're
there,
not
but
actually
we're all
going to be
too
using this
fucked
math
up.
node module. We're
What
going
are we
to use
gonna
the
do?
vector.
I'm not feeling too
Vector,
good, bud.
vector math, and rather than just plugging this in, we obviously only
Say
want
we
this
go
to
for it,
our
man.
X.
We
So
can't
we
deny
can plug it in
Let's
like
get it,
this.
baby. Alright, let's try our best.
Got it, and then
Let's go.
we combine it and then add it in.
Tablecloth settings, but I'm still in forgetting. Tried being a good boy, but I'm still in the setting. Like
X, Y, Z.
on a Friday evening, stay up all
Combine.
night and just keep
Boop.
on achieving without even drinking. I guess my
Like that.
was wrong when I was a baby. Because in my head, that just sounds crazy.
I suppose it is modular.
Like MJ and Humpty Dumpty, I was a
Right.
off the wall. Honestly, science, 'cause gravity didn't help me at all.
One.
Well, I'm too stressed for that. Different
The vector go into this surface, I hope.
This we're going to take our original one back to 1. This is
Okay. And then make the Y. Also go into that Y. Nice.
Put a swisher down the middle, no mid. Spark it up, little intermission, where's Liz? He's passed out, loose blacked out, the rest on the verge. Drank a little too much whiskey, hit him where it hurt. I am starting to feel double, I see odd. And I'm starting to mix all my words up. I'm still rapping, I'm still catching the beat. The crew drunk, but we fitted up kings. At the club, we gon' all bring the heat. No guns, better crew with Lewis on the GMB. I'm a prophet preaching off the influence. I could be drunk and sober and still fuck my past. Respect some civil liberties, y'all don't make sense. That's just some 2 cents from a broke dude paying no faded. But I'm jaded cause my shot class is vacant. Elevated when I'm draining, looking into my brain.
Make it picks 3x1.
I don't feel the same. Zooted in the back, you think I'm off the cane.
So wherever we have a module and the output is kind of whole tiles in your other text animation, what you can do is you can simply take the same input. So this is the Control Shift D on this modulator.
Control Shift D. Puppets thick as hell. Cool. I was supposed to just do the same thing.
And I can set this to be snap. Now you can see that we have
The modulo, it's gonna
snapped values in the same locations as our UVs. Supposed to take a texture, white noise, and plug that onto there. Then we're getting a random color per tile. And this is on this modulator, and I can set this to snap values on the same locations.
the white noise texture. I'm taking that and pop out there. It's gonna be 4-dimensional, of course. Okay, they want vector math again. But they're gonna subtract out. I don't know why they subtract. Thanks. Oh, I changed size of it bigger. Another vector math. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so we want this to be a scale. Determined as one of those buttons. We don't actually want it to be there, because we want this to go to there. We want that to go to there. It can take in. The scale is going to take in from the bottom combine. It spits out to subtract, right? And the top modulo goes to subtract. The bottom modulo goes to the bottom. Cool. Vector rotate. That's one of those. We can do that. That's easy. You can rotate that, of course.
I know that you can play with the centimeters for what we want to do with the size of the brick.
I want to do with the size of the bricks. Under this, giving this up.
We're going to take the value
slap the white noise into the angle. Absolute madman.
Right now, what's happening is it's rotating by between 0 and 360 degrees by radians, which is around about 6.3. What we can say is that if we have between 0 and 1, then it is around about 6 per circle.
You ain't taking your course, dog. What's looking at map range before? Okay, the subtract vector is gonna be the vector in there. Okay, add ourselves a nice little map range. Pop it in there. Let's value in. I don't know if we ever. No, the vector up there goes to material output. Everything else is the white noise. Negative 0.1. 1.
Very subtle what we actually want, but you can see as I change that seed value, we get
Heck, all the way up. 5 even. Oh. Heck, man. Yeah. Let me just try this instead.
Hey guys, this is Joe with Viore, and I'm here to talk to you
I know.
about my favorite short.
Save as.
The technical features of the short put it amongst the best athletic shorts on the market. Moisture wicking and quick dry, anti-odor and four-way, but they're not what makes them different.
Big material. Unfortunately, I don't think we're.
Hey guys, welcome back to another default CP Matter tutorial, and what this video is basically a merge of the last 7 Blender procedural node tutorials into just one video that I consider level 1. So everything here is pretty much everything before Texture Morna, and this video is for anybody who just kind of wants to watch the whole thing in one swing and just do one after another, which kind of makes sense because I made them in a certain order so that they flow together. So this is the best way to watch all the level 1 content, and before we start the whole video, I just want to mention 2 things. First of all, I'm just literally merging these videos one after another, so there's going to be a tiny drop in quality, nothing still in 1080p and everything, because after we code and other stuff, so don't expect a lot. Nobody knows him. So basically, I think we're going to do some of these, at least, like the theory of some of these, we're not going to make the results this good. You can make a bunch of them, just so you can cover every scenario. And then also, the resolution matters, and you're taking up space on your hard drive, especially if you go high resolution. On the other hand, we have this node that I made. And if we look into this node, it's actually a bunch of nodes. It turns out that this thing I made is actually a group of nodes. Don't worry about it. When I take this also gives us a circle. It almost looks exactly the same, except you can see when I zoom in, the curvature doesn't look jagged at all. It just keeps going. And that's because this circle is not made with any textures at all. It's all mathematical. So not only does this not have any resolution,
We've improved user experience,
No.
streamlined coding, and optimized design analysis.
resolution issues because it has infinite resolution. But you can see that this node also has a slider that I made. What does it do? Well, it just controls the size of the circle, and that's like not that big of a deal. Like technically you can take a circle texture and scale it, so you can do that kind of operation, but you could add tons of more controls that let you do other stuff with more complicated shapes. So
Yes.
really what we have is a procedural approach and a texture approach. And once we get into more sophisticated stuff, you know, you can just take this node and do a bunch of stuff with it. So let's say we duplicated it. Again, don't worry about any of what this means. Now I'm going to view this one and make it a bit bigger. And we can just combine these using some math.
Strange, but we gon' come
Let's
into
just
your
take
house
this
so then
one.
just
Let's take
rearrange
this one,
everything
do
that you
some
thought was
subtraction
going
or something.
inside of your brain.
Let's play
Cause
around
we
with the size
dropping
of
these
this.
harsh lyrics
And now
just
you
to
can
be
see that with a very simple edit, we have made a torus, which is kind of like a 2D donut, if you want to think about it that way. And we can control the outer ring, the inner ring, and again, this is procedural. And you could, again, do this with textures, but now we have a infinite resolution donut. So you can see how this stuff kind of scales really quickly. We went from a circle to a donut, which it is a bit more complicated. Okay, that's fine, but what if we want to do something that's actually more sophisticated? Well, there's room for that too. You can see I made a node over here called a tiler node. And if you look into this, it's not that much. It's some math nodes, some other stuff. Don't worry about what it means. But what we can use this for is, let's put our circle in here. And then we are going to take this and plug this into this mystery vector socket that I haven't explained. And now you can see we have a bunch of random circles. And now we have many, many more, and this is completely procedural, infinite detail on all these circles that we can zoom into. And the best part is we can actually animate this kind of stuff and get different seed values and kind of control where we want the circles, or you can fill everything in. Maybe make this a bit smaller so we have less of them. And now you have circles bigger. Now you have some kind of fancy floor texture. So really you have a ton of control over this stuff. So really when you think procedural, think something that is basically does not have any textures. That's the best way you want to think about procedural. If it doesn't have textures and you can control it all mathematically, it's procedural, and the benefits are you're not taking up space on your hard drive. And you have controls if you add controls, and you have infinite resolution. So that's just kind of the intro for what it is we're going to be doing. And that's how you're starting to understand.
Okay.
And I guess we should proceed. That's fine. The only other thing to talk about So luckily this is actually very simple because you can just, over here we have our workspaces, we have layout, modeling, etc. All we have to do is click shading, and we're in this pretty much the same menu we were in before. So that's pretty much the tutorial for that. You can also, by the way, really what we're interested in is this window over here, the 3D import we already have. But this window is called the shader editor, sometimes just a node editor, but we'll call it shader editor. And if you want to go to the shading workspace, open up the window like that, drag that up, and then we can select instead of shader editor, it's not the same thing, but now it's in the layout workspace, and you can also do this sideways. So let's do it like that. Normally I'm just going to be clicking shading, so that's how you get
Right, so we'll just go to the shading.
The only other things we need to take care of before we get started talking about nodes and all that is some settings. So go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and I want to make sure that you are using a special add-on called Node Ring. So you just type it, it's going to be there, and for you it's probably disabled if you haven't enabled it before. Make sure you enable this add-on. We are going to be using it literally every tutorial. And what it's going to let us do is a bunch of cool stuff. So for example, normally, if you have a node, and a branch between these, we'll talk about what all that means. The way you disconnect is you just pull it off, and then you can connect like this. And when you have a lot of nodes, that takes a while. So what Node Wrangler lets you do is something like that, and then you can connect like this. So it's kind of like shortcuts for these kinds of things. And especially if you have two different nodes, do you really want to do it like this? And if you're zoomed out, it's kind of hard to do that. Or would you rather just connect really quickly like this and disconnect? This is just a faster way to work. And there are a ton of other commands and things that Node Wrangler lets you do. But I'm not sure if this one, what I'm about to do, if collapsing a node and hiding everything except what we're using is a Node Wrangler feature, but it might be. But either way, make sure you have Node Wrangler enabled. And the other thing that you guys might care about is I think there's kind of a divide between people who like curved noodles and people who like straight ones. And I'm just going to show you how to switch between those. So again, edit, preferences. This time it is in theme, and then you go to node editor. This time not shader editor, but node editor, whatever, same thing. And we can control pretty much a lot of these things, like what color it's going to be when it's highlighted, etc.
Yeah, doesn't matter.
The bottom setting, it says noodle curving, and you can change that. So now, if it's 0, you have perfectly linear straight lines, and I think a lot of people, I think Simon Tom's even works this way. Or, yeah, sorry about all the stuttering today. Or you can do curving, which kind of gets ridiculous. But I like to keep this at around 4. And really, now that
Sure.
Probably get started on the second tutorial where we actually talk about stuff that matters. And we're just going to be talking about some super simple stuff like values, color, etc., how to control those. That is the first part of this tutorial. Hopefully you enjoyed it, and again, it's just a preview. I know we didn't go over much, but let's make that full screen. And can I still see my mouse? It was such a good tutorial, but this time I'll probably be able to say everything more clearly. So, assuming you already saw the first tutorial, because it's a series and it would make sense that you did, you probably already have everything set up, but I just want to make sure you have two things. Go to Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and make sure that you have Node Wrangler installed.
Node Wrangler's here.
If you have Node Wrangler, it's in my book. And then the only other thing we talked about is how to get the shader editor window, which is where we're going to be doing all our work. And you can either do that, again, by opening up a window, going to shader editor, or what I like to do is hitting this button, Shading Workspace. That pretty much covers the first tutorial, so why even watch it now? Okay, so again, like I said, we're not going to be really tackling material creation because we need to talk about the material system, which is this whole system in Blender that kind of tells you what objects are, what objects have materials, what are materials made out of, and it's just all these layers that go down and down and down. So let's try to keep it simple. As a default cube, and that cube has a material. See, we already have nodes down here. Okay, well, how do we know this has a material? Well, when we select our cube, you're going to see it says material over here, and in our drop down, we already have material. We can take this and give it a name. It can be any name. It can be dumb name, which isn't that first ever material, and this material. No matter what name we give it, it's still that material. So the way you want to think about this is we have an object, a cube, and that cube has a material. Let's call this, and that material is effectively the node graph, which means, as you might expect, if we change the instructions, the node network that makes up the material, it's going to change the material and therefore look different on our cube. It's pretty simple. So, again, we don't know what any of this really is, but you do see something called base color, which has a white color, and you might expect that we can change this. And you see, we turned it red, and the whole ripple effect takes place. The node network has changed, which fundamentally changes the material itself, which changes this cube. We can duplicate this, so now we have two cubes, and we can change both of them. Well, why is it changing both of them?
Sure.
Because it's a duplicate? Well, what it is it's because both of these objects, both these cubes, which are separate objects, you can see they have two different objects, cube 001 and cube in the outliner. They're two different objects. They both have the same material, which means if we okay, now from the beginning, change the node network and
None of that.
them, but can we have two objects have different materials? We can. All we need to do is add more materials so that they can have different ones, because right now if you have two objects, one material, you kind of have no other option. So So how do we make a new material? In our drop-down, we only have one option. To do this, there are a bunch of ways, but the easiest way to do this is you hit this button right here, which is new material. So now we have first ever mat 001.
Right, you can make multiple materials.
Like, why do I need to record this again? And you can see that now we have two different materials in our drop-down, and they kind of look the same, actually exactly the same, like these node networks don't change. And the reason for that is it's not a glitch, Blender is working fine. It's because we duplicated the material. When you create a new material, it will just pull from whatever material already exists, and therefore they already have the same node networks. But if we take this one, this why do I need to record this material, and change the color, you can see now this cube is blue. But why did this one not change? Well, this cube, when it's selected, shows that we have why do I need to record this material, and then this cube has a first ever map. So they're different materials. So if we want to change this one, change it to yellow, etc. And of course, at any time we can switch. So with this one, we can switch back to this. So whatever you select from the drop down will be the active material. And it actually gets a bit more complicated than that, because we talked about different objects having different materials. But can one object have multiple materials? Can it be both yellow and blue at the same time? That's where it gets a bit confusing. And it actually has to do with something called material slots, which is another layer of abstraction, because Blender loves that. And you can already see that in our shader editor we have something called slots. So you might expect that we can do something with this by, creating, subtracting slots, whatever. So let's talk about that. So let me just delete this. So right now we have a single object with two different choices of materials. One is blue, one's yellow, etc. But how do we actually have two different materials at the same time? Well, I was kind of lying to you when I said that it's as simple as object has a material and that material is the node network, because it's not that object has material. Object has a material slot. It's a container. That container has a material, and you can have multiple slots, and those all go to the object. So it's kind of like you have a list of node networks that are sensitive to object. Well, how do you see these? Well, luckily for us in the shader editor, we don't only have, the shading workspace. We don't only have the shader editor and the 3D viewport. We have this properties window, which again is in layout. So if you pull up this window, you still have this property, so you're all good there. But this properties window actually has a materials tab, which has a lot of the same options. So for example, you see this is blue, this is blue, they're all linked together, but we can take this and change it to red, and you can see everything synced there, and the names are synced, etc. What you can see is a material slot. So this is a slot, and inside the slot,
incredible.
First ever material. Different materials to be inside the slot, and you can have different slots. So now we have two slots, and let's say for the second slot we want to use the material. Now at this point you might think, oh, this kind of looks like a layer system. So we have two different layers, each with a different material. Why don't we bring this yellow one to the foreground? And then you do that, and you wonder why the cube is still red in the background. And that's because slots are kind of confusing. It's not what you'd expect. It's not like a layer system where you can make something in the foreground and make it transparent so that both are seen at the same time. What a slot is, the way you want to think about it, is a slot is a selection. Meaning that right now this slot, which is in the second down the list, this slot is the full cube selected. This yellow one has none of it selected. Okay, so what do we mean? If we go into edit mode, you're going to see these three buttons appear. It's not going to be in object mode, you have to go to edit mode. And I'm just going to deselect everything. With this material selected, which again is the entire cube, we're going to click select, which says select by active material slot. We click this, and now the whole cube is selected. What did it do? It basically selected every single face that had this material. So let me deselect everything. Now we're going to do this yellow one, select. Nothing happens because none of them are selected. So the way Blender really works is an object is composed of a bunch of faces, and it's that each face of an object can only have one material. But since most objects have more than one face, you can have a bunch of different faces with a bunch of different materials. So one material per face. But if you have more than one face, you can have a variety of materials. So what do we mean? So let's just select the face like this top one. Again, all of them are red. I'm just you can see no matter what I select, so I'm going to select this yellow, no matter what face I select, it's going to automatically switch over. So I'm going to select a face, then I'm going to switch materials, and you see it didn't actually turn it yellow. What we have to do is once we have everything set up, we click assign. So now we have assigned a selection. So now we have one object with multiple materials, but again, each face has one material, as far as I know. And if we go back into edit mode, now if we select our yellow material and click select, it's only going to highlight the top face, whereas this red one, we click select, it's going to do the other 5. And we can make this a bit more complicated, so we can just select these 3 and do an assignment of our yellow. So now half the cube is yellow, half of it's red, etc. And even from this properties window, which is in the materials tab, we can also, again, add more slots, but also create the material. So you don't necessarily have to do it here. We can also do it over here. So let's add a new one. We'll call it, we don't have blue, so let's make one blue. And you can see the slot now has the blue material, but nothing changed because it just duplicated our yellow material. So blue, yellow, they look exactly the same. So if we turn this to actually blue, now you see that everything works out. And let's say that we wanted a blue and yellow cube, what would we need to do? Well, the blue can stay blue, and the red needs to become yellow. So with this material, which again has the selection of these 3 faces, what we need to do is just switch this over to yellow. So I think at this point we are starting, or at least hopefully understanding the hierarchy we have. We have an object is composed of faces, and each face is basically a selection represented by slots, which are containers for materials, and each slot's going to have a material which is a node network, which when you say it out loud makes it sound pretty confusing, and I guess it is pretty confusing, so I think you'd be right about that. And really, the rest of this series is the art of taking a material and making it into what we want. So now that we know how the material system works, it's all about actually messing around with these nodes. So, you know, something more complicated than just taking the color and like switching it up. I think we can do better than that. This camera switching setup is quite something. The only other thing I want to talk about, hopefully I'm not forgetting anything. By the way, you can also do all this slot stuff we were talking about. You can do it from here. As you can see, we have different slots, and you can see it switches. If we go to slot 1, you see slot 1 is blue, so it toggles over to our blue material. And then, you know, same thing for this. So if we change this one to red, we're now in slot 2, it's going to be red, and everything's linked is what I'm trying to say. The only other thing I want to go over is material deletion, which is actually also a bit confusing. So you might expect the way you delete a material, it's right next to create material. You go to this X to unlink data block, which is just digging into Blunder's data block system, which is great, but very confusing. If you click this X, you're going to see that it removes the material, but it's still in this list. So first ever map, delete, it's still there. What's up with that? And it has the 0 next to it. Basically what it means is when you click the X, it unlinks the data block, and what should happen is when you close your Blender project, assuming it's saved, you close it, and then you open it again, only then will it actually be deleted. And the 0 basically means that nothing is using that material. It's deleted, and therefore it's going to be gone. Restart your Blender project, close it, you open it. And you know, that can be a bit off-putting, because you can't delete something, even if we, you know, do it on all 3, we're basically jumping around over which one has the 0. How do we actually delete something without restarting Blender? The way we do it is, again, it's all this stuff with data blocks. So what we have to do is in this outline window, you can hit this button that is on view layer, I think. And what we can do is instead of that, we can view the Blender file, which is just a list of assets that make up your Blender project. So now we're really getting into this hierarchy stuff.
Right.
What we can do is
Sir.
in these assets, you're going to see, sorry about the face hopping around, it's automated. What you can do is go to materials, and you see we have 3 materials, which makes sense. We open it up, and we have our 3 materials. If you right click one, you can do all this stuff stuff with them, linking whatever, but you can just flat out delete it. And you can see it's gone from here, and now our drop down only has 2. So let's just keep going with our deletion. So just right click delete, and now we have nothing in our drop down. Sorry about the voice. So yeah, that's how you actually delete something without restarting the project. And then to create new stuff, you can see it kind of has some kind of white default material. It must, because clearly we have no material selected, so it's defaulting to something. We can create a new material, which will give us this simple node network to begin with, then we just modify it in the same way as before. So that is pretty much the essence of everything you need to know. You can see that it only showed up on these 3 faces, because even though we deleted the material, the material slots still exist. So if we want to have everything be red, we can just delete the first slot, which is going to make everything be red, because when you have only 1 slot, it's going to default to every face having that material. So
Yes.
there you go. I feel like you now know the hierarchy, and I understand that it's a bit confusing, but you have to I can't think of the word now. Faces, each one has the assignment of this material, which we can name anything. I'm just going to call it default material, and you can see that when we change this color, it's actually changing
Right.
the node network, which is the
Just the
material that is on the server.
It's the procedural part.
We already went over this. I'm not going to keep talking about it. So today, I just want to talk about how this shader editor works in the first place, and then we're gonna kind of get rid of this big node and replace it with something that we can actually manage. But before we do that, let's talk about some basics. So you're in the shader editor, and you see me, zooming in and out, navigating. How do I do that?
Right.
Well, pretty much all of Blender is pretty connected with its hotkeys. There's still a couple exceptions to that, which they need to get to, but most of the stuff makes sense. So for example, in the viewport, how do you navigate? Well, you hold middle mouse to pivot. You can zoom in and out by scrolling. You hold shift to do this thing, and it's pretty similar. So in the shader editor, which is 2D, not 3D, we zoom in and out with the mouse wheel. We pan around by holding, middle mouse button, and that's pretty much all there is. There's no 3D rotation for this 2D thing. So zooming in and out and just moving around. Okay, cool. As for the nodes, we can select them by clicking them, do box selection, Alt-A to deselect, same stuff as usual. I'm assuming you've probably used Blender a bit and you're not just hopping into this first time with materials. Yeah, so we move around.
That's where you're wrong, bucko.
Moving nodes, you have one selected, you hit G for grab, and it works exactly the same. Pretty much every shortcut you already know works here too. To delete something, you hit X.
Got it.
And you can undo it. And again, X over here, it's all the same stuff over and over and over again.
Now I know.
Yeah, I think the only other shortcuts we're going to be talking about right now, there are a ton, but for right now, we want to talk about how to quickly disconnect and connect nodes. And normally the way you do this is you just hold this connection and drop it into the background to disconnect, and then you do the opposite to connect, and you can do that to any socket of the node. But since we have Node Wrangler, the fast way to do it is you hold Control and then right click and drag to cut. So again, Control, click and drag to cut. This works if you have multiple.
That's fine. I'll just pull it.
You're passing through all 3 of them, and now that's gone. And then for fast
Incredible.
connection, so instead of doing this, what we're going to do is hold Alt and then do the right arrow or right mouse button drag. And you can see that it's highlighting which nodes are going to be part of that connection. So if we duplicate this, by the way, duplicating is Shift D, or you can just, copy, paste, should be, yeah, there we go. Same commands as always, seriously. If we have 2 of them, we can hold Alt, right click and drag, and then choose which one we want to be fast connected. We're going to do this one, then let's do this one, and we hold Control and right click to sever this, sever that, and that's pretty much what you need to know. So pretty much right clicking is the thing that lets you do Node Wrangler stuff, and you either hold Control, Alt, and there's also something for Shift. So for Shift, if you hold Shift and then do it, you're going to see we get this line, and when we drop it, it's going to have a hinge. I'm sure there's a good name for it. I think it's called rerouting. So the point of this is, let's just delete it. Instead of having something like this, which can get pretty messy when you have a bigger node network, you hold Shift, right-click, drag, and you have this nice thing that you can reroute everything to. It still has the same information, but whatever. Okay, cool. You now know hotkeys. I hate talking about them, so we are done with them. And by the way, you have G for grab, but rotation and scaling, don't do anything because it doesn't really make sense in this context. Okay, so now some other basic stuff
And we
before we
can
switch out this node for other types of nodes. You can think of this as this giant green principled BSDF is basically holding a lot of information about what we want our material to look like, and then we're sending all these instructions through the connection or the noodle to the material output. And more specifically, it's going to the surface socket, meaning take everything here and send it to the surface, the material surface of any object that has that material. Pretty simple. So it doesn't really matter where this is. This is the same node network as this one. It's really topologically equivalent, or there's a name for that. There's like this doesn't matter. Doesn't matter. I was gonna do some mathy nerd stuff. So what I'm saying is, if we have two of these, one's red and one is blue, no matter what we do to this, it's not gonna matter until we make this what is connected, and vice versa for this. It doesn't matter. And again, Control right click to sever, Alt right click to connect. And if you can't remember that because your brain, I don't know, can't handle that much information, you just do it like this. And yeah, there are many more hotkeys, but let's ignore those. So instead of messing with this principled BSDF that can get pretty confusing, you have color, you have how metallic it is. I mean, you can just kind of drag these things and see what they do. Here's roughness, like how much does it look like a mirror. Instead of doing all that, what we're going to do is we're going to simplify. So instead of that giant thing, we are going to add a node called the value node, which is the kind of the atom. It's the base, most basic node you can have, and then you build up from there. So to add, you do the same thing as in the viewport. So viewport, you do Shift A, or you just click add and then choose what you want to add. Same thing here, Shift A to add a node, or you just go to add and select your node. So we're going to do Shift A and then either go to input and then pick value, which is going to add that. You can do that, or you can do Shift A and then type it in right here, value. And I think you can just hit Control A. No, that's a function nodes thing. Shift A, type in value.
We have a value.
I like to add all my nodes because once you know the names, you kind of don't want to go through the menus. So again, we take this, we connect it either that way or Alt right click, and now you can see that it went from black to, you know, gray or white or something. And this node is
Something in the middle.
as what we had before, which was this giant thing called, again, you can just type it in, principled BSDF. I mean, compare these two nodes, if you know what I mean. Okay, so we have a value node which has a value. Right now that value is 0.5, and we can change it. And by the way, when you hover over something, it tells you what it does. So default value, input value used for unconnected socket. Sometimes it's going to be more useful than that description, but whatever. What we do is we take this and change it, and you can see our cube is going from black to white, etc. And if we look more closely, notice that as we go down towards 0, it gets darker. And then once we get to 0, we just type it in, it's a pure black. And if we go to negatives, even lower than that, it stays black. Conversely, if we go up from 0 towards 1, it turns more and more white. And then because of a technicality, which we'll talk about in a second, you can even make this bigger, and you can kind of tell it's getting even brighter. So 1 compared to 10, 10's brighter. But normally, we use the value node for we can put whatever we want. We can type in high. It's going to give us an approximation 3.142. And if you click this, it will give us like 6 digits or something. You can put in whatever number you want, fractions, negatives, whatever, giant numbers. But there is a reason that we'll talk about that we can between 0 and 1, which makes me think, okay, well if 0 is black and everything under 0 is still black, and 1 is white, why does it get brighter than it is currently 0 than 1, right? If I'm saying it goes from 0 to 1, why is this showing something different? And, you know, there's a lot of reasons for what I'm about to explain, but this is just a color management. So if we go to the render tab, we can go to color management, so render tab, color management, transform, and basically what this view transform is, it kind of tells Blender how to handle colors. So standard works the way you expect it to. So 1 is white, and if we make it brighter, nothing happens. Nothing's happening. Meaning 1 is the cutoff, and 0 is the cutoff for 1. Meaning that you can still do something below 0 and something above 1, but it doesn't really matter in this sense of seeing the color on the surface of our object. Something like Filmic has more high dynamic range or whatever, and that lets you go even higher than 1, so maybe you can think of it as a, I don't want to say 1 over x, but I'm saying that you can keep getting brighter and brighter and brighter, and as your numbers get huge, you know, how much brighter it gets kind of slows down, but you can always keep going, so it goes from like 0 to infinity instead of 0
Sure.
to infinity. I'm just saying keep it on standard and don't worry about it. So, there you go. So we have this on standard, we go to 0, it's black, negative is, you know, still black, anything under 0, and then we go all the way up to 1, and then nothing happens. Okay, cool. So
Told
now
me absolutely nothing.
this is a great way to make an object either black or white, and you're thinking, okay, I don't know what this has to do with anything, but it's a good fundamental thing to understand because we build everything up from this. So hopefully you understand the value node. We can have 2 value nodes, 1, 0, 1, 0.5. That's a comma, 0.5. If we take this and connect it, what's going to happen? Think about it. It turns gray, so somewhere between black and white, halfway in between. If we change this one to 1 and we connect it, what's going to happen? Think about it. It's going to become as white as possible, assuming we're in the standard view transform. Okay, cool. What about negative numbers? We said that it's black, so how do we even know that it's actually storing this number? What if it's accurate? And I would say there is, and I'm going to prove it to you. So we're going to have 2 negative 1s, and now I'm going to
Right.
teach you about another node. So you can go Shift-A to add, and then I'm trying to think where it is. Is it in Converter? I'm looking for the math node. So in Converter, you're going to find math, or, of course, Shift-A, type in math node. Okay, cool. So now we have something a bit more complex. It looks a bit bigger than the value node, not as big as the principled BSDF. Okay, so if you go to this math node and check the drop down, you can see
Do math on them.
mathy stuff, which some of it you may recognize, some of it you don't. But I can guarantee you recognize division, multiplication, subtraction, addition, and that's what we use for most of our mathematical operations. So, I mean, if you're scared by this, get out of here, okay? It's just addition, subtraction, multiplication.
Casual gatekeeping show.
Swear. So, what we're going to do is I'm going to set this to multiply. And you can see it has 2 values. We can connect this. Let's connect this to our surface. And notice that right now we have 0.5 times 0.5, which is 0.25, which is, you know, it's closer to black than it is to white, because it's, you know, closer to 0 than it is to 1. If we do 0.5 times 2, which is 1, you can see this turns white. So if I make this value node 1, so these 2 things are essentially equivalent. Here
Right.
we have 1, here we have 2 times a half, which is 1. If we switch these, nothing really happens. It looks exactly the same. Okay, cool. So you can either just, you know, put in numbers here and have it do an operation, or you can instead plug in numbers instead of just typing them in here. It's good because you can control them from separate nodes. So let's take this and connect it. So we have -1 multiplied by -1, and it gives something that's white, because -1 times -1 is 1, which is as white as you can get. But that proves that -1 isn't like rounded to 0, right? Even though it's black, it still has that information. And hopefully you understand what I mean by this. If these were zeros, this wouldn't work again. So times 0 is going to give us 0, because anything times 0 is 0, and I think you get the point. We can also do other operations like, let's say, addition. So -1 plus -1 is a -2, which is under 0, so it's black. And if we want this to be exactly white, we would need this to be 2, because 2 plus -1 is 1. If we want this to be exactly 0, we put in 1. 1 plus -1 is 0.
Cool.
And then if we make this
Right.
anything bigger than 1, it's going to be slightly more closer to white than it is black, right? It's going to become gray, is what I'm saying. You can see that in action. Okay, there we go. That's pretty simple. I think you understand. Of course, the math node, let me undo that. The math node has tons of operations like, you know, sines, cosines, you know, trigonometry, and then also some other things like greater than or less than. Let's just do one of these, so greater than. We'll check if, you know, it describes it. 1 if A is bigger than B, else 0. Meaning, if something is bigger than another number, it's going to output true, meaning white, otherwise it's going to say false, which is 0. So let's try it. Let's see 2 and 1. Is 2 bigger than 1? Yes. Let's try it. 2 greater than 1. Outputs white. So it's outputting 1. If instead I made the 0, is 0 bigger than 1? No, outputs black. Now if we make these the same, I'm not sure what it's going to do exactly. I guess it's going to output false because greater than is like strictly greater than. It's not greater than or equal to. If we make this anything bigger than 1, immediately it shifts to white. And I think you can probably understand why. So math node, tons of stuff. And then the last thing I want to leave you with for this, you know, introduction is we have value, which is one kind of gray scale. If you think about it, it's either
Working.
gray, white. You can't really get any color out of it. How do we take this and then level up to color? Well, the way I want you to think about this is any color, it can be described by how red, green, and blue it is. So red, just the color red is 100% red, 100% green, 100% blue. And then, you know what, and then something like purple is like, you know, half red, half blue. It's like mixing colors. We'll talk about it. So what we're going to do is we're going to do Shift A, and then is it converter? We want a combine node. Let's see, is it in here? Yes. So in converter, you can see all these combines. I'm going to add a combine RGB, or you can just type it combine RGB and just add that in. And take this, and you see it has a yellow socket, which normally indicates, you know, color or something that isn't grayscale. So you can see values have this kind of grayness to them, and these 3 sockets for inputs are also gray, and it outputs something with color. And we'll talk about what green and purple mean and all that, but let's just connect this. Which gives us black. We can take this and make it more red, so you can kind of see what's going on there. We can make it more green, make it more blue, or we can mix them. So if we take something that's 1 on red, meaning 100% red, and also make it 100% blue, we got, you know, purple, right? It's mixing colors. If we do red and green, I think that's yellow. Yeah, and green, 100% green, 100% blue. What does that give? I guess it gives like teal, turquoise, something like that. So normal
cyan even.
Instead, what we can do is we can have 3 value nodes. Again, that's Shift D to duplicate, and I'm just going to connect them. And again, use the Alt right-click thing for the shortcut.
A safe way for your customers to pay.
And you can see
Simply
that we have
download
something
the
that's
PayPal
perfectly
app
white
and
because it's
display
100%
your own
red,
unique
100%
for your
green,
customers to
100%
scan.
blue, meaning
Whether
that it
you're a
has all the
market seller,
colors and that's white. And of course, if we
Poodle
change these to
camper,
0, we get black.
piano tuner,
Okay, cool. And you can see
plumber.
that if you pull the
Signing
slider,
up
it
to
doesn't let
accept
you go
touch-free
under 0.
payments for
Maybe
your
you can
business
type it in.
is easy.
Nope, it just rounds to
Touch-free
0. It doesn't
QR
let you
code
go under
payments.
0 or
Shop
above
with
1.
PayPal.
And this is what I'm talking about, where a lot of nodes just want you to use the 0 to 1 interval. Of course, you can type in over here -2, and we talked about how it actually stores that. But yeah, I mean, 0 to 1 is what we're doing a lot of the time, so we need to get used to it. So we have combine RGB. Let me just reconnect these. And you can see the nice thing about Node Wrangler is it will automatically detect if a socket is filled up. So if we do this, it's going to automatically go to green, and then to blue, and then whatever. So let's just set all of these to 1, making it perfectly white. And I just want to put this
You got it.
So here's blue. We can take this down. We remove the blue. All we're left with is yellow. Doesn't matter what arrangement we have these in. Again, it's topologically equivalent. It's invariant to change. There's a word for this again. Doesn't matter, but it exists. Yeah, so you can slide these around. And then you can also do the opposite operation, where if you have a color, so instead of combine RGB, we can just add an RGB node, which is kind of like skipping the middleman of choosing a red, green, and blue. I mean, you can, you know, pick your color wheel and then set RGB values, or just, you know, choose it from this color wheel. Conversely, let's put this, so it's going to be, you know, this shade of green. We can do the opposite. So instead of taking 3 numbers, combining them into what is a 3
You can also split.
right now, and then, you know, showing that as a color, we can take this 3D vector, meaning just a list of 3 numbers, how red, green, and blue it is. We can take that, and instead of a combine RGB, converter, separate. Where is it? Separate RGB, or just type it in. And in the beginning, you're probably not going to memorize.
I can separate.
That's fine. And what the separate RGB node does is it takes our RGB, our color that has some amount of red, green, and blue, and then separates it instead of combining it. So I'm just going to choose a color that is, pretty much perfectly green. So you see red, it's outputting black, which means it's 0. Again, black is 0 or negative, but in this case it's 0. Meaning this shade of green has no red in it. If we do green, you should expect this to be somewhat white. Perfect. And then blue, it should be close-ish to 0. Let's see. Yeah. And then if we bring this somewhere over here, that's kind of like a turquoise, we can expect our blue to become, think about it, slightly brighter. Cool. And we can actually put an exact value. So let's have this be 1, 1, and 1, meaning that blue is going to be 1, green is going to be 1, red's going to be 1. We can make this exactly 0.5, and it's only outputting our red, which is 0.5, so if we had a value of 0.5, this should look exactly the same. There you go. And of course you can mess with stuff in between. You don't have to immediately connect it to the surface of our material output. We can add in a math node. We can add in a math node, as we talked about. So here we have red value of 0.5 and 0.5, and we can just add these, making them 1 white, and then we can bring that down. So if I make this 0, it's always like dive into this a bit more, so there's math for combined to the hotkeys. C's result, that's all been building. Yes, you see that. Yeah, you can see that. And yes, we're going to be doing green screening using a bunch of math, and if you remember from everything we learned, this is a procedural series, meaning that we're not going to be using textures, but just for this one, for the purposes of example, we're going to be using this image as a texture, but these these fundamental ideas are transferable. But I thought it'd be funny if we use this businessman. And basically the approach we're going to be taking here is we're going to take this image, we're also going to pick a color, being, this green in the background, and then we're going to calculate the distance between the green we chose and the rest of the image. And, as you might expect, the distance between the green and this background, the green screen, is going to be 0, because they're the same. And then wherever this businessman is, it's going to be some number bigger than 0. So, like, for example, maybe the skin is closer to green than the black of the business suit. And then we're going to say wherever the distance is 0, just get rid of the texture. That's the idea. So that should isolate the green screen, and that's just a bunch of math. And to calculate distance in a 3D, since that's what we're doing, because we're finding the distance between two colors, which has R, G, and B, three-dimensional vectors and all that. We'll talk about it. We need a formula for calculating distance in 3 dimensions. And that formula is going to be this one, which is the Euclidean distance formula. And yeah, it looks intimidating, but really it's just a 3-dimensional version of the Pythagorean theorem. So instead of like x squared plus y squared is equal to z squared, or maybe a squared plus b squared is equal to c squared, I don't know what school you went to. Basically now we're doing the 3-dimensional approach, and the whole idea of this tutorial is just getting used to using math more intimately. So again, version 2.81. I'll point out when we finally upgrade to 2.82. Let's switch back. There we go. Let's go full screen, and then for this one, first time ever, we're not going to be using the cube, but instead we're going to be using a plane. We just want to see our green screen texture. So we have this. We go to the shading workspace like always, and we have Node Wrangler enabled. I don't want to tell you again. And since this doesn't come with a default material, because the cube does, it should be in our dropdown, so let's check. And it is, so we're just going to assign a material. So now this object, which has one face, has the assignment of this material, and again, we can choose the color. So truly, this node network is the material affecting the object. We'll stop talking about that maybe 5 tutorials from now. So we can call this the green screen material, since that's what it's going to be. And then we're just going to select this, and then X to delete. We already talked about this, same hotkeys. And we're going to start off by actually importing in our image texture, and that's something we're not going to be doing very frequently, again, procedural. To do this, either Shift-A to add, or just go to add, and we're going to type in image texture node. You can also do Shift-A input, and then is it in here, or might be somewhere else? It might be in texture, and then image texture, so same thing. And what we're going to do is connect this to the surface. Again, Alt, right-click, drag is the fastest way to do that. And then open up the texture of... I just downloaded this from Google Images. Pick anything. And yeah, so again, this node, which we haven't talked about and probably won't talk about again, just stores an image texture that we loaded from the hard drive and sends it to the surface of the material output. And you can see it's kind of looking stretched horizontally, like compressed. And there are ways to deal with that without changing our plane, but since we haven't talked about texture coordinates, we're just going to scale our plane on the x-axis to correct for that, but there is a way to do that without changing the shape of it. Okay, cool. So how are we going to do this? Well, again, what we said is we need this image, a color being this shade of green, and we need to calculate the distance between them, between the green and the texture using Euclidean distance and all that.
Let's take a image handy.
So since we need access to the whole three-dimensional stuff and all the math, we don't want the color, again, yellow socket means color, of the image texture. We want to control the individual values of red, green, and blue. And like we talked about, we can use combine RGB and separate RGB. So Shift-A, this time we're just going to type it in, and add a separate RGB node, which again, shows us only the red of the image, only the green, only the blue, and as you might expect, for red and for blue, the background is going to be completely black because it's a value of 0 of red and blue, but it's 1, or should be around 1, for green. And by the way, I haven't talked about this hotkey, you're probably wondering. Instead of doing my alt right click or maybe just selecting one and dragging it, another hotkey that I'll now introduce is you hold Control Shift and then click your node, and that's going to hook it up to this temporary viewer node. But what it really does is it just has it display really quickly. So Control Shift click on this one, now we're viewing this, and then here, and if we keep clicking it, it's going to cycle down. So that's Control Shift click. That's a useful one. I use it quite a bit. Okay, so now we have access to red, green, and blue.
That's very good.
We're also going to add a color. Again, we can do that from Combine RGB, which lets us control the amount of red. So this is completely red. If we add some green, it's going to turn yellow because we're mixing these, etc. So we can either do that and then try to, guess what shade of green it is, or instead we're just going to add an RGB node.
Grammarly does more than catch errors.
Bet it does.
With Grammarly, you can
Grammarly's able to get out of here.
That one. And we need to pick the shade of green, so you can kind of approximate it based off our texture. But instead, what we're going to be doing is actually using a hand feature, which is open up your color wheel, and then with this eyedropper tool, you just select the exact shade of green. So we can, I wonder if it works for the whole screen, could I select this shade of gray? Looks like I can. So that's really the trick we're going to be using here. So instead, Shift and then click your node. That's going to hook it up to this temporary viewer node. But what it really does is it just has it display really quickly. So Control Shift click on this one. Now we're viewing this, and then here. And if we keep clicking it, it's going to cycle down. So that's
neat.
That's a useful one. I use it quite a bit. Okay, so now we have access to red, green, and blue of the image, and we're also going to add a color. Again, we can do that from Combine RGB, which lets us control the amount of red. So this is completely red. If we add some green, it's going to turn yellow because we're mixing these, etc. So we can either do that and then try to, guess what shade of green it is, or instead we're just going to add an RGB node, which I think we talked about. And now we're viewing that one. And we need to pick the shade of green, so you can kind of approximate it based off our texture. But instead, what we're going to be doing is actually using a handy feature, which is open up your color wheel, and then with this eyedropper tool, you just select the exact shade of green. Could I select this shade of gray? Looks like I can. So that's really the trick that we're going to be using here. So instead, let me just undo. And that should be the same shade of green. Let me just make sure. And yeah, so now we use this through another Shift-D to duplicate, or just, again, Control-C, Control-V. Eventually we'll stop talking about hotkeys. We're going to send this through a separate RGB node, which again lets us see red, green, and blue. And it's going to be most green, which is going to be closest to white. And by the way, I didn't even mention, as always, since we want to be working on intervals between 0 and 1, in this case it doesn't matter because we're doing it all mathematically, but visually we want to be using the standard view transform. We talked about this. Instead of having a whiteness that can just keep going past 1 all the way to infinity,
We want
McDonald's is
1
always
to be
fucking
as
up
white
my
as you can
order,
go,
bro.
and 0 to be
I
as
asked for
black.
Sprite,
Negative,
gave me clown
negative
juice.
numbers are black, numbers above 1 are perfectly white. Okay, cool. Now the only other thing I want to make sure that you do is with this RGB node, you open it up, and you're going to see it's going to be selected to hue saturation value. That's what this stands for. Make sure it's on RGB. Basically, these are two ways to choose a color. RGB is a color, is how much is it red, how much is it green, how much is it blue. Hue saturation value is just what hue, like what type of color it is. So I'm going to change hue. You can see it goes around the color wheel. That's what that means. Saturation means how intense it is. So if we drag it, you can see it's going towards the center. And value is how bright it is. So you can see we're changing the brightness. So really this is kind of like polar coordinates versus rectangular coordinates, whatever. Just choose RGB and make sure to select, let's view our texture and make sure to select that. Okay, perfect. So
Sure.
make sure that's RGB. Okay, so now we have 2 3-dimensional vectors. In other words, we have 2 colors. One of them is a bunch of colors, being this texture, and the other one is just one color, and we've separated them into their components. Now we just need to do the basic formula, and again, if you don't know the Pythagorean theorem, basically what we're going to do is we're going to compare the reds by subtracting them. So we'll do this red minus this red, and then same thing for the green, this green minus this green, this blue minus this blue. Whoops. So basically we pair them together, then we square them, add them, and take a square root. So it's kind of like a squared plus b squared, and the square root comes from the c squared. Don't worry about it. Don't worry about it. This is just practicing some math. Read up on the Euclidean formula if you have no idea what I'm talking about. I said this is going to be adolescent level. We're upping it. This is high school math now. So we are going to be adding in a math node to do our math. And first of all, we want to compare reds, so we are going to set this to subtract, and you can either click that, or you can just type in the letter S, and for like division, you type in D greater than G, basically the first letter. So we're going to do subtract, we're going to do red, Alt, right-click, drag, and then same for this one. So now we are comparing the amount of red. So there you go. You can see that the background is black because this color is perfectly green, so it's not going to have any red, and this texture also doesn't have any red here, so when you subtract them, it's going to be 0. Now we can just take this, duplicate it, and now do the same thing for green. And by the way, let me talk about another shortcut that might help, because if we Alt right-click drag, it's still going to use our red, because that's the first step. A way to avoid that, I think, is you hold Alt, Shift, and then do it, so now we get a blue line. And now we can actually select where it comes from. So instead of going from red, we're going to start with green and send it to the first value. So it goes from green to the, did I say second? I meant first value over here. So again, Alt, Shift, right-click, drag from green to the second value. Okay, cool. Now let's just pair up our blues. And really, you can do this more efficiently with actually only 1 or 2 nodes, but I just want to talk about separating colors into their elements, so from 3D vectors to their red, green, and blue. Do the math and then combine them again later. It's not the best approach, but it's fine. So we are going to combine the blues now, and this one I'll just connect manually. So here we go. Red, green, blue, cool. Nice. So now what we need to do is we've subtracted, now we need to square. And you can either do that by setting this to multiply and just multiplying it with itself, which is the same thing as squaring, or instead you can use power, which is like exponents, and you set the exponent to 2. So we take what we plug in here and raise it to the power of 2. Take that, duplicate it, and do the same thing over here. So once you make kind of the stuff for the red, you can just duplicate everything down and it will be pretty fast. And again, we can view all these controls. Click, click. Okay, cool. So now we've done all the differences squared. Now we just add these together. So duplicate another math node, set this one to add by just clicking A. We're going to add these, and sadly there's no way to add 3 things using 1 node as far as I'm aware. So we're going to add these, and then we're going to add that to this cell. So instead of adding it in 1 step, we have to do it in 2. And you can already see what we get over here is essentially a mat.
of basically where there isn't green, or where there is green to where there isn't green. And you can see that it's not perfectly white, like this area is a bit gray, meaning that the original image, this shade of like purple or whatever, must be slightly closer to black than everything around it. So technically, this is a fine measure for measuring the distance between our green and our texture, but technically it is correct. It is correct to take a square root at the end, which is a monotonic function, so it doesn't matter. But there you go. So now we've basically made a node network, which is the same thing as squaring, or instead you can use power, which is an exponent, and you set the exponent to 2. So we take what we plug in here and raise it to the power of 2. Take that, duplicate it, and do the same thing over here. So once you make kind of the stuff for the red, you can just duplicate everything down and it will be pretty fast. And again, we can view all these, Control-Shift-Click, click, click. Okay, cool. So now we've done all the differences squared. Now we just add these things together. So duplicate another math node, set this one to add by just clicking A. We're going to add these, and sadly there's no way to add 3 things using one node as far as I'm aware. So we're going to add these, and then we're going to add that to this sum. So instead of adding it in one step, we have to do it in 2. And you can already see what we get over here is essentially a map of basically where there isn't green, or where there is green to where there isn't green. And you can see that it's not perfectly white, like this area is a bit gray, meaning that the original image, this shade of like purple or whatever, must be slightly closer to black than everything around it. So technically, this is a fine measure for measuring the distance between our green and our texture, but technically it is correct. It is correct to take a square root at the end, which is a monotonic function, so it doesn't matter. But there you go. So now we've basically made a node network that takes 2 things and then calculates the distance between them in terms of color. So again, the way you want to think about this is that where it's white, you have maximum distance between the colors, meaning that they're very different. They're kind of like on opposite ends of the color wheel, very far apart. And then where it's black, the distance is very close to 0, meaning that they're almost overlapping and are almost the same. Okay, cool.
Right.
So now, how do we take this math and, use it on our texture? So we want our texture, but also, remove all the green so we can put something in the background. And there are a bunch of ways to do that, but I think probably the coolest is to introduce, if I haven't already, the Mix RGB node, which is kind of like the math node, these math nodes, but for colors. So not just 2 values, but 2 colors. It doesn't work with gray sockets, but rather with yellow sockets, is the way you want to think about it. So we can either Shift A, and then I think it should be in Converter. I'm not sure exactly where it is. We're looking for Mix RGB. Maybe it's in color. Yeah, Mix RGB. Or again, you can just type it in. Okay, cool. And it looks pretty similar to the math node. You have like 2 inputs, a kind of mode you choose, like addition, subtraction, whatever. Then it has some extra stuff. It also has this clamping, which we can talk about later. But yeah, it's pretty similar. So what we are going to do is for our mix node, we are going to, and this is where Node Wrangler becomes very useful, because trying to select this and then do it from very far away is hard. We're going to Alt, right-click, drag, and now this texture is in the first socket of our Mix RGB node, and then we're going to take this one, same thing. Okay, cool, and view it with Control-Shift-Click. And basically what it's doing right now is it's taking our 2 inputs, being the texture and the color, and doing something called mixing. And there are a bunch of different things you can do. You can either mix, you can color burn, whatever. Each of them have different meanings. And then we can also control which side this operation favors. So we can pick a factor of something that just favors, we'll talk about what that means, our color, or we can have it favor our original texture. And I'm pretty sure what mixing technically means is it's averaging out the 2 colors, so it's splitting it up into components, averaging them on red, green, and blue, and then combining them. But there's also different kinds of operations. But you can see that when we change this factor, we can have it, kind of reveal one or the other. So what we want to do is have it reveal our texture only where this is white, and then reveal our background wherever it's, black. So what we do is we just take our factor, and instead of picking a number, we input this, you know, it's a value, meaning it's between 0 and 1, and it's one-dimensional, but really it's kind of like a texture of its own, because it's different at different points. It's not white everywhere, which is something we haven't done before, I don't think, where it's different in different areas of our geometry. So let's take this, make it our factor, and view it. And you can see that we're getting something very confusing. So first of all, to clarify, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take our green and I'm going to disconnect it. And you can see now we have something that's pretty close. We have our green, and then we can actually choose the color. So it's kind of like we have an inverted green screen. And as you can see, like we talked about, hopefully YouTube compression doesn't kill it. You can see a bit of difference over here where the color was originally closer to green. And the way you want to think about these nodes that have two inputs, especially not necessarily in the math node, but in general, you want to think of bottom as foreground. It's this really horrible design that Blender has. So instead of layers where the top one's the foreground, the bottom one's the foreground. So we have our image texture, and then in the foreground we have this shade of purple, but only where this factor allows, which is, you know, where this was white originally. So what we can do is we can just take this and put it in the foreground, and now you can see wherever the factor is white, we have our image texture, which is on the bottom, which means the foreground appearing, and then we can actually choose our background color. And this is exactly what green screening is. We've removed the background and then chosen a different color. Now, of course, there are two things to address. First of all, can we put like an image behind here? And second of all, what about this green outline? So first of all, let's talk about the texture in the background. Well, first of all, let me ask you, where would you plug it in? Think about it. Well, it'd be exactly wherever this magenta is, which is the first socket, which is the background. So again, Shift-A, image texture. Again, we're going to try to not use these in the future. Open, desktop, and let's go with the thumbnail from the last one. I have these really strange thumbnails. So let's take this and plug it into the background. And that is a green screen. Now, the question is, how do we get rid of, you know, this green outline? Meaning, our factor is a bit messed up at the edges. And as you can hopefully see, this thing is mainly...
So, you've got your own business, and you're doing everything you can to promote it. But Mark...
black, mainly white, but on the edges it's very, very slightly gray.
Right.
Meaning that the distance isn't super far away on the edges, but just kind of halfway in between, and that kind of makes sense because you have the green screen probably spilling light onto his sleeves or whatever. So it's a bit green, so it's actually a bit closer than everywhere else. So the way we deal with this is we want to say only keep everything that is very, very far away. So instead of just looking at the distance and then being like, show this wherever the distance is high and where the distance is low, don't show it, and in between kind of half show it. What we want is a cutoff. And to do that, there's a bunch of ways. We're going to take this, first of all, just kind of clean up over here. Let's bring this down. So what we want to do is we want to take, again, all these nodes we did, all these blue nodes are calculating the distance, and now we just want to do a bit of a cutoff. So I'm going to duplicate this and add it over here. So now this is what's going into the factor, and we are going, let me actually do it as well, and we are going to set this to greater than, which again, it outputs white if, it's going to output white if this, whatever we put in here, is greater than what is over here. And clearly the whole image is black because nothing is going to be greater than 2 because our factor is going to go between 0 and 1. The distance goes between 0 and 1. So if we set this to 1, we have only the parts of the texture that are very, very, very non-green, which I guess is probably apparently where skin's very orange.
Where we at? Greater than?
Maybe not, it looks pretty close on the color wheel, whatever. So what we can do is now we have kind of like a threshold, and we can just bring this down and reveal different amounts of our image. If we bring this too low, like to, 0, everything is going to be white because even if it's a distance of 0, or maybe 0.001, it's going to be bigger than 0, so the green screen is effectively not being used. So we need to just choose a factor that has a nice effect with our edges. So I don't know, let's try 0.3, and you can view it. And you can can see we still have our edge, so we just want to slide around this value, and you can see it's kind of going away. But of course, the issue is if you make it too intense, it's also going to cut out, parts of the interior, like, these fingers and all that. So you kind of want to pick the optimal value that doesn't have that effect. And of course, you can do a bit of math to actually do what we want to do, but also keep the interior. But we're not going to get too complicated on this. This is just like a tutorial to do a bit of math. But you can see that this is a better result than not having it. So this is not having it, and this is having it. And by the way, what I'm doing is I'm clicking M, which is another hotkey, to mute. And basically what it does is it kind of goes through the node network, but almost assumes that it's not there. So you kind of want to imagine this wire just passes through it. So M to mute and unmute. And yeah, the cool thing about this setup is once you make it, you can use it on a bunch of different scenes. So if we just look up more green screen stuff,
right,
different shade of green, looking for something that looks a bit different. Okay, this one's probably not going to be the best, but we can try it because there's two different shades of green, and our green screen setup is very, very not intelligent. We can make it better, but right now this is what we got. We can make it kind of two, and we want it. So first does. We're just trying to remove pretty much all the green, which is everything except for node. So right now, I guess that it came from. I lost about eventually donates taken the greatly be described a while, so that's going to be embarrassing for me. So first of all, what are drivers and what am I going to be teaching you? So remember from the last 4 parts, assuming that you've seen those, we have a combined RGB node, which is basically saying, let me just add another that we haven't altered yet. A combined RGB node is just a way to choose a color by picking a red, green, and blue amount, so I can make it more red. As we approach 1, it becomes fully red, and we can mix it with something that's fully green, so red and green make yellow. And then if we also add 1 for the blue, which means maximum amount, we are going to get white, because we have maximum amounts of red, green, and blue, and then these are all 0. So we already know what combined RGB is, but you can see that my version, which I'm going to connect, my version is purple, and you may be thinking, okay, what's up with that? Well, what does that do? Well, what these sliders are actually rigged to do right now is notice what happens when I take my cube and move it. Oh, so moving it is actually altering what these values are, and you can see once I finish a movement, so I'm just going to click here, you can see I moved it along the x-axis, and this has updated for red to 2.665. And if you're thinking, oh, did I take this x value and copy it here dynamically? Then yes, that is exactly what I did, and that is exactly what a driver is. So we have a pretty simple setup. We can either control by moving these location sliders, which again are the same as these sliders, or we can just move it in the viewport. So if we want something that's perfectly red and green, meaning yellow, we just set this to 1, set this to 1, and you can see these don't really update that quickly. It's kind of strange, but usually you just have to toggle a frame and it happens. Make it more red. As we approach 1, it becomes fully red, and we can mix it with something that's fully green. So red and green topic a bit and just talk about drive. What I mean is if you want to do making these, appreciated real node series on you, so embarrassing for me. So first of all, what are drivers and what am I altered yet? Thing that's fully green, so red and green make yellow, and then if we get black. So we already know what combined RGB is, but you can see that my version, which I'm going to connect, my version is purple, and you may be thinking, okay, what's up with that? Well, what does that do? Well, what these sliders are actually rigged to do right now is notice what happens when I take my cube and move it. Oh, so moving it is actually altering what these values are. And you can see once I finish a movement, so I'm just going to click here, you can see I moved it along the x-axis, and this has updated for red to 2.665. And if you're thinking, oh, did I take this x value and copy it here dynamically? Then yes, that is exactly what I did, and that is exactly what a driver is. So we have a pretty simple setup. We can either control it by moving these location sliders, which again are the same as these sliders, or we can just move it in the viewport. So if we want something that's perfectly red and green, meaning yellow, we just set this to 1, set this to 1, and you can see these don't really update that quickly. It's kind of strange, but usually you just have to toggle a frame and it happens. You can see that it's actually updated. And again, this works dynamically, and that is the point of drivers. And the z-axis I reserve for making it blue. But again, it only goes between 0 and 1, so once you go past an X value of 1, it just remains red. Okay, so this is what a driver is. I think you understand the demo, so let me just go full screen and start up a new scene. And then I guess there wasn't really too much point to that because we just need to go to the shading workspace. You know what that's all about, is where you edit your material. So again, probably the last time I'm going to say it for this tutorial, and I'm not going to say it in future ones, hopefully. We have a cube that is some geometry, which has this material assigned to it with the name material, and that material is basically made up of this node network. With this node network, I'm going to replace this principled BSDF with Shift-A to add, and then I'm just going to type in, you can either do an RGB node technically, but what I would recommend is combine RGB, because then we can actually manipulate these sliders individually. And then additionally, like we talked about, we can add in a value, which is a single number, to control this instead, if we just want to separate it for some reason. So, to do this driver stuff, it used to be pretty hard, but now that we're using 2.81 and onwards, it's actually gone a lot easier. What we have to do is I'm going to hit N to reveal this location, rotation, scale stuff, or you can go to the object data, I think. No, it's one of these. Object properties, yeah. Here you have location, rotation, scale. What we're going to do is we're going to right-click any value that we want. So let's say we want the X location. You right-click, and then you click Copy as New Driver. So we are going to be copying this X value, whatever it is, no matter what we update it to, as our driver. And then let's say we want this affecting our red channel. We right-click and then do paste, there we go, paste driver. And now when we change this X value, you can see after we toggle the frame, it's actually going to update here. And you can tell that it's being affected by driver because it's purple. And of course, you can do this dynamically. And you should be able to animate this and have it update per frame. So if on frame 1 we want it to be 0, we can add a keyframe here. Frame 40, we'll have it go to like 3. Again, it doesn't matter once it goes past 1. I mean, I guess it does matter a little bit since we're not on standard. Again, standard actually has an accurate 0 to 1, where anything beyond 1 remains white, but still makes sense to 0 if anything. You can watch a video about that. And you can see that
Hey, we don't see.
dynamically doing it per
Just
frame.
jamming.
Of course, we can do the same thing with other stuff. So for example, we can actually take the same driver, and it's still in the copy. We can still paste the same driver over and over. We can right-click on green, we're going to paste it, and then we're also going to do it for blue. And I want you to think about what's going to happen before I play this animation. One value, being the X location, is controlling this red, green, and blue. So what do you expect to happen? We play this. It remains perfectly grayscale, so it goes from black to gray to white. And that's because at all points, at every frame, these 3 sliders are going to have the same values. So you have the same amount of mixing. So that should be pretty intuitive. And I just want to really stress the point that you could do this for anything. So let's say we take the Y location, copy as new driver, set this to paste. So now, let me actually remove the animation here so we're no longer messing with that. So now, X-axis controls the amount of red. Whoops. Let me remove this driver. By the way, if you want to delete a driver because blue is still being affected, a bunch of ways to do it. The easiest way is to right-click and then delete driver. You can either do that or...
There are many people who misunderstand what fiction is. They'll say fiction is a bunch of lies.
Or go into the, driver editor, which is one of these somewhere in here. There should be drivers. Yeah, here, drivers. But now we should be able to move to the X-axis to affect red and move along the Y-axis to affect green. And these things, of course, mix because of this combined RGB. We can do the same thing by just, putting it in a value thing that goes to green. It's an equivalent setup, although there is reason to do that because you can take this and plug it into multiple different nodes, so you only have to have one driver. So let me just paste it. Oop, Blender crashed. I would normally cut this part of the tutorial, but that is the reality. So that is some kind of bug or something. I don't know. Maybe it's because I plugged a driver into something that has the same driver. That's an issue, but it's in the tutorial. And let me just reset up quickly. Combine RGB. So I guess that's a warning to be careful with some kind of contradictions with drivers, or I don't know. But we can take the same kind of lessons and apply them to everything we talked about before with nodes. So for example, instead of just doing something simple like we just affect the amount of red, we're going to send it through some math first. So let's add a math node. and I'm going to connect this to red. So again, right now it's outputting 1 for a red, which makes it perfectly red because we have 0.5 plus, addition 0.5. So instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to use Vision. I'm going to set this to 1, and then for the second value, what I really wanted to stress is that you don't, again, need to pick X, Y, or Z location. You can pick scale, you can pick dimension, and in fact, anything that has a slider like this so that we can put an input for, you should be able to actually copy as a driver. So we can actually take the strength of the world. I mean, it's kind of like unrelated, but you could use that as a driver. So in this case, what I want to do is take the frame number, so this controls what frame we're on, and I'm going to right-click, copy as new driver, and I'm going to paste it into the second socket. So we have 1 divided by the frame number, so the reciprocal, which means as we go frame by frame, it's going to become kind of dimmer in terms of red. So here we have 1 divided by 1, which is 1 redness, then 0.5 redness, then a third, a fourth, and as we tend towards, a bigger number, it's going to get closer to 0. And I think, let's see what happens when we play this. Yeah, you see that it's not updating on every frame, so usually it's better to just
Interesting.
frame by frame, but when you render, since it renders on a frame by frame level, it should work. So sometimes viewport playback doesn't make too much sense, and I don't know if that's a bug, but this video is all about bug reporting for Blender. There are some issues, unless this is a design feature or something. Okay, so what else
that's
do
a
we want to talk
feature,
about?
right?
We can pretty much put this anywhere. I guess the last thing I want to talk about is instead of doing it the way we've been doing it, which again is kind of new to 2.81, I think. I don't think it was in 2.8. We can do it the old-fashioned way, which in some ways gives us more control if we don't want to mess with math nodes. So let's say we wanted to take the reciprocal, but not send it through the math node where we did the division. How would we do that? Well, let's say we want the scale, the X scale, to be our driver. We're going to copy this and paste it into red. So paste driver, and right now that means that if the scale is 1 on the x-axis, which it is, we're going to have 1 for red, and then as we scale down on the x-axis, it gets closer to 0, which means it becomes dimmer in terms of red. If we want the reciprocal, we can either do what we did with the division, or we're just going to right-click, and then we're going to edit the driver. And this is where it gets a bit confusing if you don't know what you're doing. Basically, what you're looking at right here is what is happening behind the scenes. So what we are looking at is this driver is looking at the scale of our cube, and this 0, instead of having it 1 or 2, basically means is it looking at X, Y, or Z, where I think 0 is X, 1 is Y, and 2 is Z. That's just some array stuff. Don't worry about it. But what we can do is instead of average value, we're going to set this to scripted expression. And instead of taking the scale, we're going to do 1 divided by scale. So the same way you would write it in a program or in a calculator or something, I don't know. So 1 divided by the scale, then you update. And then, right now it's still the same because 1 divided by 1 is 1. But now when we scale down, you can see it's getting brighter because it's filmic. So normally we wouldn't see that. But what I want to show you is that when we scale it up, it's going to get dimmer because now it's a reciprocal relationship. Before it would have just stayed equally red if we were on the standard view transform. So that's the reciprocal. We can also do other kinds of math. So edit driver, we could do 1 minus the scale. So right now it's going to be perfectly black because the X scale is 1. So 1 minus 1 is 0. But then if we make it smaller, it should get more red. Yep. And you could, do any kind of expression there. And on top of that, when we delete it, if you're using a different version of Blender, if you want to call different, call different data paths that for some reason you can't like right-click or whatever, you can, again, right-click whatever you want to affect. We're going to add a driver now, so instead of pasting 1, we're making 1 from scratch. And then let's say that we want, instead of like the cube, we're going to look at the light. So that's the this light right here. So we're looking at the light, edit driver. So we have the light selected, and we can say, oh, do we want it to reference, where we're moving the light, how big it is, whatever. And I'm just going to choose like X location is fine. You could do a whole bunch of different stuff, but this is a good way to do it. In world space, meaning like what location does it have in the world instead of like local space or whatever. And that is going to be our variable. And then what's being outputted is the variable plus 0. So the way you want to think about it is we're looking at our light, we're looking at the X location, this is our variable, and we're outputting the variable plus 0, which is, the variable. Okay, so let's actually see if this works. So we have our light, I'm going to 0 it out. And you can see this actually made our cube black, and as we move our light on the x-axis, you can see it gets more red and then closer to 0. And basically that means you can kind of texture or have a material of one object reference the location of another. So you can do a lot of cool stuff with that once you do kind of more complicated math. Alternatively, what you can
That's
do,
good.
let me delete the driver. Alternatively, we can add a driver, and then instead of, picking an object, we can just, put in a arbitrary data path and do a lot of different stuff with this. So let's do single property. We can look at, I don't know. I don't really know what I want to pick. So what I'm trying to say here is you can access any part of Blender to use as your driver. So for example, you can see we can pull like stuff from fonts, we can pull stuff from lights, we can, so you can kind of have like the curvature of a spline affect the how red it is, whatever. But yeah, this is just a simple example, and now you should be able to use drivers. And this goes beyond just the, shader editor. You can create a driver for the strength here. So let me just add a, you know what, let's copy this. We are gonna copy as a new driver and then paste this into here. And then let me go to rendered view. What this does is as we move our cube on the x-axis, our world should be getting brighter and then darker. So it works on all parts of Blender, but I wanted to show it on the shader editor. So I know this is kind of a departure from all the procedural stuff, but you can see how it might be useful. Maybe you want a material that changes color depending on how close an object is to another, and if you wanted to do that, you could either do all the math about, Euclidean distance like we talked about last time, or there's actually a distance option, I think. Yeah, distance. And then you pick whatever two objects you want. But we're not going to do that here. You can probably figure out how to do that. So yeah, there you go.
Cool.
Another successful, I'm going to burp. Another successful procedural nodes tutorial. Hopefully it makes sense until I explain what I mean. But it's going to be very simple, and this is what I expect to be a very fast tutorial. Although I said that last time, and it ended up being that material is the node network that I'm looking at over here. The reason this looks black is because nothing is connected to the surface of the material output, but you should know this by now. And you can see that I made two nodes over here. Don't worry about how I made them. I mean, this is how I made them if you actually dive into this. This is called a node group. I just grouped a bunch of nodes and just compacted them into one unit so you wouldn't have to see everything. Eventually I'm going to teach you how to make these, but what these node groups do is I'm going to connect this to the surface. Again, you can either do that manually, or Alt right click drag, or Control Shift click. These are all ways to do it. And you can see what this does is it gives us a circle that is a bit off center. Again, the center is where this 3D cursor is, and it's just a bit to the left. And what we want to think of this as is where there is a circle where it's white, we have a value of 1, it's perfectly white, and then everywhere else is black, 0. So 1 in the interior of the region, and then 0 on the exterior. And then if we switch over to this one, we have kind of the same thing, but it's just over to the right. So now here we have 1, and over here we have 0. Okay, cool. So what can we do with both of these together? So one's a bit to the left, one's a bit to the right. You can imagine that we can kind of make a Venn diagram out of this. So let me just add a math node, and this is kind of the focus of this video. Right now it's going to be set to add, and we're just going to be adding these two inputs, which kind of gives us this Venn diagram looking thing, and let's think about why this makes sense. So in this region over here, being like the circle on the left, it looks, a normal amount of white, the same as if we were to just have this node only. So what's happening here is we have 1 from the circle on this node, plus 0 if we look at this one. This region is black on this one, and it's white over here. And then together they add to 1. So what I'm trying to say is when we add things, in the past we've just been adding like 2 different numbers, as in 2 different values. So let me just make 2 values and just plug those in here and here. We've been adding just 2 numbers, and then we know, how this works. So if we make this -0.5, we're going to get 0, -0.5, plus 0.5,
Procedurally
0. And we can do all kinds of stuff.
That's
You
what
see that it's the same shade of gray, white, or black everywhere. And we say that means that it's kind of uniform because we're just adding 2 numbers. It gives an output, and then it shows it. Same thing for multiplication or subtraction or whatever. But again, if we add something that doesn't look the same everywhere, like the
You're gonna watch right now. Trying to use Which was resource.
we actually get something more interesting. So the math
Yeah.
code doesn't just add things in general, it adds per point. So it will add the two values at this point and at this point and at this point, and it may give different results in different areas, which should be obvious if you're seeing this. So again, this is going to be 1, this is going to be 1, and then where they intersect, where the Venn diagram, the area in common, that is going to have a value of 2, and you can tell because it's a bit brighter. And again, if you remember, if you've actually been watching this whole series, the reason why, even though it's above 1, since normally you do things between 0 and 1, the reason it's even brighter than the 1, which is normally not what we're used to, is because the color management, our view transform is set to filmic instead of standard, where standard caps off at 1 and then everything beyond it is white, and then filmic goes from 0 to infinity, where the higher you go, the brighter it gets. But just for this video, normally we use standard just for this course, but for this video I'm going to use filmic just to show that we can do addition beyond 1, like it stores those values. Okay, so my point is addition just kind of combines things, right? So we had one circle, another, and now we have both of them together in kind of this peanut shape if you ignore that this area is brighter. And that's what we'd expect. So addition is kind of like an or. So this or this. Cool. What about multiplication? With multiplication, we only get the area in common, right? We only get where the left and the right circle are intersecting. And let's think about why that's the case. So in this area, both circles exist, so they're both have a value of 1, which means when we multiply them, it's 1 and it shows up here. But let's say something a bit to the left over here. What happens here? Well, it's on the left circle, which means it's 1, but on the right circle, that area is just black. So focus on this area over here, where my mouse is. Maybe I can, yeah, this area right here. So on the left circle, that is a 1, and sorry about all the radiator noise if you can hear it. That's going to be annoying. It's
Can't hear a dang thing.
This is 0, because you can see it's black. 1 times 0 is 0, and that's why it kind of goes away. So multiplication is kind of like an and system, meaning where's this and this at the same time. So just to reiterate, multiplication, can I erase this? Multiplication is and, addition is or, and I can tell you're getting bored of this video, but I'm telling you we're going to be using these concepts all the time to, like, say we want to combine